Welcome, ghouls, to today's episode of Mental Health is Horrifying. I'm your horror Barbie host of darkness, Candace Green, psychotherapist and all-around spooky bitch, podcasting from my bat-filled cave in Toronto, Canada. A lot of my therapy sessions right now are sounding pretty similar. In general, people are like, "Hi, Candace, literally what the hell is going on and why is any of this happening?" And I don't know. I don't know what any of this is. I'm not an oracle, but what I do know is that you're not crazy for feeling off the charts existential anxiety right now, given the political milieu in which we find ourselves. Every time I open my phone, it's like flames jump out, followed by debris from the inside of a dumpster. I mean, the sovereignty of my country has been threatened repeatedly by a disease who shall remain nameless. So-called free speech now means only being allowed to say what they tell you can say. A chainsaw-wielding billionaire is taking money and resources away from the most vulnerable, and measles are back. In times like these, when I need to repeatedly breathe into a paper bag, honestly, I am once again turning to horror to soothe my weary soul. Because horror cuts to the rotted core of things and tells the world like it is. And one horror masterpiece I have come back to time and time again when truth is much scarier than fiction is Mike Flanagan's miniseries masterpiece, Midnight Mass, a show about an institution that is supposed to guide and take care of its most vulnerable, infiltrated by blood-sucking vampires. Sound familiar? Okay, so let's get right into it. Let's check out Midnight Mass and its portrayal of the crisis of faith that accompanies a world-class existential crisis.
We tend to dislike mysteries. We feel uncomfortable not knowing. The more that we know, the less we bend, the more brittle we become. The easier to break.
That wasn't an act of God.
Wasn't it?
It's okay to just look at the world and say, why? I don't understand. Why? Who are you? You know who I am.
After serving 4 years in prison for a drunk driving crash that killed a young woman, Riley Flynn returns to his hometown of Crockett Island, a tiny offshore fishing village reeling economically from an oil spill which crippled its fishing industry. Having lost his faith during his incarceration, Riley struggles to reintegrate with the town's devout Catholic community, including his own family, childhood sweetheart, regular townsfolk fighting their own demons, and an extremely zealous nun named Bev who seriously needs to chill. In lieu of their regular priest who appears to be mysteriously missing, a charismatic priest named Father Paul arrives, and shortly thereafter, miracles begin to occur. A girl in a wheelchair can walk again, people don't need glasses, and old ladies become young and hot again. Hallelujah! It is later revealed, however, that the miracles are occurring because Father Paul smuggled an angel/vampire back with him from his trip from the Holy Land and has been spiking the church sacrament with the vampire's blood. Riley himself is attacked by the vampire, turning into one, and demonstrates this to his good friend Erin by explaining the whole thing to her, and she's like, yeah, okay. And then he emphasizes his point by bursting into flames when the sun rises, sort of like I do when I come into contact with light. The entire congregation is eventually turned into bloodthirsty vampires. Chaos breaks out on Crockett Island, and we basically end with the entire congregation bursting into flames when the sun comes up, save for 2 kids who escaped in a canoe. Those kids are gonna need a lot of therapy. Midnight Mass is a 7-episode miniseries written, directed, and produced by Mike Flanagan and shown exclusively on Netflix. Flanagan has a number of other incredible Netflix series, including The Haunting of Hill House, The Haunting of Bly Manor, The Midnight Club, and The Fall of the House of Usher. I recommend watching all of them. I truly believe Mike Flanagan is a genius, but I also want to caution you that if you're a sensitive angel like me, you will be left so emotionally wrecked after watching any of his series that it will take you a significant amount of time to recover. I'm still waiting. Mike Flanagan has this incredible way of balancing the beauty and tragedy of life so poignantly. That final scene in The Haunting of Bly Manor with the hand on the shoulder, yeah, I can't even think about it without becoming very upset. His scenes just stay with you for a really long time, and for me, Midnight Mass never quite left. Midnight Mass is Mike Flanagan's magnus opus, a masterpiece that he had been working on essentially his whole life. He first began thinking about the horrific overtones of religion as a 10-year-old altar boy at a Catholic church, where worshippers drank the blood of Christ, ate his body, and where the wrath of God was thoroughly documented and expressed. Flanagan toyed with and shopped around Midnight Mass for years before it was greenlit by Netflix, with it first appearing as an Easter egg in his 2016 film Hush, starring his wife Kate Siegel, where she starred as a deaf author trying to write in her cabin, where she's beset upon by a murderous home invader. Her character's best-selling work? A novel called Midnight Mass. It also popped up again in Flanagan's film Gerard's Game as a hardcover book one of the characters is reading. In addition to addressing Flanagan's own relationship to religion, it also tackles his relationship to alcohol and sobriety as portrayed through Riley Flynn, the main character who is haunted throughout the series by the memory of the woman's face he killed as a drunk driver, splintered with shards of glass that flicker with the red and blue lights from the police sirens. Mike Flanagan was at Fan Expo a few years ago, and I thought about going to get a photo with him or an autograph, but, I knew it just wouldn't be satisfying. He's not, no offense, the type of guy like Skeet Ulrich who is so cute and you just want to stand beside and get your little photo. He's more the type of guy that I want to take out for dinner and learn every single thing inside his brain. So Mike, if you're listening, let me know if you want to go get some sushi or something. My treat. This series is so intricate and broad sweeping, and I could honestly dedicate an entire podcast unto itself just to talk about Midnight Mass. But for this episode, I'm going to focus on 2 key scenes that for me really highlight what it's like to go through an existential crisis and how people find their way to the other side. The first scene is where Riley and Father Paul are sitting in the rec center to do their AA meeting, and Father Paul begins telling Riley about the role of religion in giving meaning to tragedy. Hamish Linklater is so perfectly cast as Father Paul in this series because, I want to believe whatever nonsense he's on about too. Look how cute he is. He's so charismatic and charming, and this is the point. Like a false prophet, like a beautiful gilded church, like beautiful influencers or people who speak with so much certainty, we want to believe the things that come in nice packages. Riley is reckoning with his drunk driving, which took the life of a young woman. Once a devout member of the faith, Riley lost his belief in religion following his accident, which took a life. Unlike Father Paul, who believes through the Bible that everything happens for a reason, it's all in God's plan, there's an unseen path right now, Riley rejects this. He believes no, there was no reason for this senselessness, for his selfishness, his recklessness. He does not benefit spiritually from manslaughter, and he does not get to come out of this on the other side as an enlightened being. Riley, through his hardship, believes that everything does not happen for a reason. Some things are just horrible tragedies, and he does not accept the balm of religion that aims to soothe away the pain of human existence.
I killed someone. So who's to blame there? I am to blame there. God. Well, he just kind of let it happen, didn't he? See, that's the part I cannot square. Because you're right, there's so much suffering in the world. So much. And then there's this higher power. This higher power who could erase all that pain, just wave his hand and make it all go away, but doesn't? No. No, thank you. The worst part is that it lets all the rest of us off the hook. We can all just stand by and watch Lisa Scarborough wheel herself around town. We can watch Joe Colley slowly drink himself to death. We can watch so many people just slip into these bottomless pits of awful, and we can stand it. We can tolerate it because we can say things like God works in mysterious ways. Like there's a plan, like something good's gonna come out of it. Nothing good came out of my drinking. Nothing good came out of me killing that poor girl. Nothing good came out of Joe Colley's drinking, and not a single good thing comes out of Lisa never being able to walk again. Nothing good came out of a metric ton of crude oil filling up the bay. And the only fucking thing that lets people stand by watching all this suffering doing fucking nothing, is the idea that suffering can be a gift from God. What a monstrous idea, Father.
The philosophy that Father Paul is offering to Riley, Catholicism, doesn't make sense to him anymore. But the questions that Riley is now asking do seem to fall more into the category of existential psychology, which explores 4 existential givens that seek to give voice to universal experiences of the human condition, including death and human limitation, connectedness and isolation, freedom and responsibility, and meaning versus meaninglessness. You may perhaps be most familiar with the existential exploration of meaninglessness or nihilism through the work of famous philosopher Friedrich Nietzsche. For me, this is also akin to one of my personal favorites, the French Théâtre de l'Absurde, Theater of the Absurd, where they explored what happens when human existence lacks meaning, popularized by plays like L'étranger by Albert Camus, and two plays that heavily shaped my outlook on the world, take from that what you will, En attendant Godot by Samuel Beckett, and Reclos or No Exit by Jean-Paul Sartre. For any Americans listening, I'm Canadian, and it's normal for us to do all of our kindergarten to high school completely in French, so this is why I am intimately familiar with French absurdism. Canadians are great, aren't we? But whether you call yourself a nihilist or an absurdist, the idea is that life has no objective order or structure except what we give it. Shrugging off society's facades, one discovers that all values are baseless and that reason is ineffectual. Sounds like my kind of party. Riley would definitely party with the absurdists because he too seems to be at a point in his life at this current juncture where it feels like life has absolutely no meaning. Pain and suffering are inevitable and there is no master plan. I can understand why his AA session with Father Paul becomes frustrating to Riley when Father Paul begins the session by reading the Serenity Prayer. God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, courage to change the things I can, and wisdom to know the difference. And he tells Riley that our pain and suffering can have a purpose if we just seek to find it. Father Paul trying to force meaning upon him through scripture isn't going to help. Just like someone trying to jam a gratitude journal down your throat when you're not in a place to receive it isn't going to help you either. As the meaning-making creature that he is, Riley has to make sense of his experience in his own way, in his own time. And right now, he sees his killing of an innocent woman as a senseless act of destruction, an irreversible tragedy, a horror, and there is no deeper meaning. In many ways, good for you, Riley, for being able to own your mistake and not spiritually bypass your way oh, it's God's plan, whatever. Everything happens for a reason. He is really staring straight into the darkness of his own humanity, and he is not blinking, and there's something admirable about that. What meaning someone does or does not create out of trauma is so personal to them and will come in its own time. Creating meaning, as psychologist Irvin Yalom states, is what helps humans to create a more authentic and free existence and endure the inescapable realities and tragedies of life. In my work as a psychotherapist, I specialize in grief and trauma, and it's so important when sitting with people in deep pain to let them create their own meaning in whatever way makes sense to them. Sometimes that meaning may never come. The meaning of something like the loss of a loved one may just never make sense. And maybe that's the point. As humans, we work so hard to try to make sense of the ultimate mystery of life. What happens when we die, and why do we suffer? But this is the ego's desire for control, or what is referred to as over-functioning. Under-functioning is allowing our shadow or soul to accept mystery. Psychic distress is found when we spend too much time at either end of this equation. Psychic balancing is found somewhere in the middle of what we can control and accepting the inherent mystery of life. The second scene I'd like to talk about is the one where Riley begins to create ultimate meaning out of his life. The second scene from Midnight Mass that really stands out to me and takes my breath away and every single tear in my face, every single time I watch it, is when Riley and Aaron discuss what they believe happens when they die. Like, God damn it, Mike Flanagan. Whew! This is such a classic Mike Flanagan scene. These long, in-depth monologues that cut so deep to the core of the human experience and lay you out completely bare. I would love to include the entire scene for you right here, but it's over 10 minutes long, so I'll just include some little clips. Erin, having just lost her pregnancy when she unknowingly consumed vampire blood and it terminated her pregnancy, believes that when she dies, her baby will be waiting in heaven for her with all her other family members that have been there this whole time, taking care of her, naming her, giving her the full life that she was too precious to have here on this wretched earth.
She's home. And there are people there, and she doesn't know it, but they're her family. Her grandfather and her great-grandfather, and they love her, and they name her. And then when God reaches down and kisses her head, and the second he says her name, she grows up in a blink. She's perfect.
Having gone through my own experiences of pregnancy loss, I can't really say what I believe happened, or where they went, or what it all means. But I do know that every time I listen to this monologue, tears spring to the deepest parts of me, and I feel something bigger than myself, something mysterious and aching. I feel things I can't really name or place. And when I can't find the words, I flip over my tarot deck and I search for what it feels like. And for me, this feels like the Two of Swords. A profound feeling that is a mix of mystery, sadness, and knowing. Like the moonlit ocean pictured behind the blindfolded woman crossing herself with two swords. She sits in contemplation, connecting with what she feels to be true about this earthly plane, balancing the complete bewildering unknown of all that she cannot see or fathom. For Erin, heaven is not diamonds or rivers of gold. It's being with her little girl. That's what will happen when she dies. Something different will happen for Riley when he dies. Riley doesn't believe in heaven. He believes that when he dies, he will scatter. He will burst into pieces and become the trees, the stars, and tiny pieces of everything.
Oblivion. And all the other little things that make me up, microbes and bacterium and the billion other little things that live on my eyelashes and my hair and my mouth and on my skin and in my gut and everywhere else, they just keep on living and eating. And I'm serving a purpose. I'm feeding life. And I'm broken apart, and all the littlest pieces of me are just recycled, and I'm billions of other places, and my atoms are in plants, bugs, the animals, and I am like the stars that are in the sky. There one moment, and then just scattered across the goddamn cosmos.
In existential psychology, meaning can be organized into at least 3 different types of meaning: false meaning, transitory meaning, and ultimate meaning. False meaning can be described as myths without any healing or sustaining power. This type of meaning is typically fleeting. At times, They may help people cope and maybe survive, but they have no power to address the core existential issues. Examples of false meaning could include money or power. Transitory meaning can help us cope, but cannot help us to transcend. This type of meaning may facilitate growth and lead to ultimate meaning, but in themselves are not ultimately meaningful. Examples may include work, service, leadership, education, self-growth, and self-awareness. All of these can be positive, healthy values and can help lead to the discovery of ultimate meaning. Ultimate meaning is a type of meaning that aids in transcending the existential givens of death, isolation, freedom, and meaninglessness. This type of meaning acknowledges the inherently relational nature of human beings, meaning that we rely on one another to create meaning, purpose, and richness in our lives. Ultimate meaning necessitates relationships with each other, with God or whatever that means to you, with other people, animals, and nature. From this standpoint, ultimate meaning challenges Western ideals of individualism, hyper-independence, and total self-sufficiency. These aren't helpful qualities at times, but ultimate meaning acknowledges our human/animal nature and that in the end, we need each other to survive and to flourish. Riley has been broken and has lost all sense of meaning. But in returning to Crockett Island and reconnecting with his loved ones, he finds his ultimate meaning. It's easy to shit on things. It's much harder to believe in something. When we look at all the pain and suffering in the world, the bleakness and the meaninglessness, it's hard to believe in anything. It's so much easier to look at the black hole, to acknowledge how horrible and dark it is, and to feed our fear like a vampire in the night, coming to take all our hope away. It's so much harder to look at all the chaos, pain, and suffering and still be able to stand firm in what you believe at the end of the day. In the end, what meaning does Riley make of his life? What does he believe in? It seems to me that in the end, Riley believes in Aaron. The meaning Riley made out of his life was that he was meant to die, and all those pieces of him that would remain behind as he foretold were meant to try and save the people that he loved. During his AA meeting in the rec center with Father Paul, he talks about the alternative to AA that helped him called RR, Rational Recovery. It uses something called AVRT, Addictive Voice Recognition Technique, where he was taught to identify the addictive voice, separate it, and control it. This is essentially parts work, or archetypal work, or internal family systems, or whatever you want to call it. But in the end, it's the recognition that humans are not all one thing. We are made up of many and often competing parts. Riley was able to recognize that he was not all bad, and he could use the good parts of himself, the ones that would stay behind in the trees and the stars in the end, to try and save Aaron and his friends. Once he learned about who Father Paul really is, and the so-called angel he brought back to Crockett Island with him, He knew it was a story so preposterous that Aaron would never believe him, and he didn't want to risk the community he loved falling victim to the twisted army Father Paul was trying to build. Riley had this dream throughout his life of being in a canoe at dawn, a prophetic dream about the meaning of his life. And so he took Aaron out in that canoe to show her how he had become infected by the vampire. And then at dawn, he burst into flames in a scene so incredible that I can't stop thinking about it. And Aaron screams. Knowing that Mike Flanagan grew up profoundly Catholic, I wonder if Riley is an archetypal Jesus figure, sacrificing himself and taking on the sins of the world for the greater good. And this is an important distinction for me, and maybe for me to make clear here. We are not praising Riley for a suicide. Riley is a metaphor, an archetypal figure, and his sacrifice is merely a representation of the part of himself that he no longer wants to give space to on this earth. This is a message and a metaphor about being with the good parts of yourself, letting those flourish, and ultimately not letting the darkness take over in the end. In the end, I love that Midnight Mass doesn't really have a happy ending, because I think that's the whole point of Riley's rejection of religion. Riley couldn't just save everyone. Evil did win out in the end. Crockett Island burned. Everyone died in the rapture, save for 2 little kids, 2 innocents, who made it out on a canoe as they watched everyone and everything they knew and loved burn in the distance. The last thing we hear Lisa say is that she can't feel her legs. I guess miracles are over. How do you answer that question? What do you believe in? Of course, it's easy for me to say, I am against fascism, human supremacy, and the destruction of nature. I am against the oppression of people. I am against intellectual laziness and decay. And I am against Crocs. But what are you for? Amidst so much pain and a seemingly never-ending uphill battle and ugly footwear, it seems much harder to proclaim what you are for, what you are building, creating, who you are connecting with or empowering, or like the Ace of Pentacles, what seeds are you planting and tending so that they may grow when you need them most? Like Riley scattering into the universe to continue nurturing human life. Of course, I can't answer that question for you. What Midnight Mass teaches us is that we all have to make our own meaning. We risk total destruction if we abide false prophets. But the question of what you do believe in is one worth considering, perhaps now more than ever. That, my ghouls, is the story of Midnight Mass. I rewatch this show, honestly, like once a year. Am I a masochist? Who knows? But it's truly a masterpiece, and I learn and feel something new every time I watch it. And that priest is hot, okay? Mental Health is Horrifying is entirely researched, written, edited, and produced by me, Candace Green, registered and spooky psychotherapist. If you like this podcast, please consider rating and reviewing on your preferred listening platform. It really helps the show to reach all the other spooky ghouls out there, and I will be eternally grateful. And an eternity is a very long time for a vampire, okay? If you live in Ontario and are interested in psychotherapy with me, I offer therapy for final girls in haunted houses who want to make sense out of the guts of their lives. I specialize in grief and trauma and incorporate both tarot and dream work into my practice as tools to delve deeper into fields of psychic terrain. You can follow me on Instagram at Mental Health is Horrifying, and you can also learn more about me and my services through my website, manymoonstherapy.com. Or you can also howl at the moon and I will hear your call. Bright blessings.